That question alone has driven men mad, not because it lacks an answer, but because the answer is too vast, too intimate, and too final to accept. When the Imperium speaks of Tyranid Hive ships, it uses the language of machinery out of habit and desperation. Ship, vessel, bioconstruct, words meant to impose familiarity on something that has none. But a hive ship is not a craft that travels through space. It is a migrating god of flesh, older than any empire, and infinitely more patient. To ask what life is like inside one is to misunderstand the premise, because life inside a hive ship does not belong to you. It belongs to the ship. From the outside, Imperial Auspex scans show colossal silhouettes drifting through the void, their outlines writhing like bruised constellations. They are kilometers long, sometimes dozens, sometimes hundreds, their mass dwarfing battleships and blotting out stars. But those readings capture only shape and movement, never intention. They do not record the low psychic pressure that bleeds outward from the hive fleet like a gravitational tide, pressing against the minds of astropaths and navigators long before the creatures themselves are visible. Long before the first spore strikes a planet, the hive ship has already arrived in thought. Calling it a ship is a lie born of necessity. Ships are built. Ships are crewed. Ships can be abandoned. A Tyranid hive ship is grown. It is born in the dark between galaxies, assembled cell by cell through processes no human biologist could survive observing. Its hull is not armor but skin, layered in chitin, muscle, and living bone that flexes as it moves. Its engines are not reactors but vast metabolic furnaces that burn matter and starlight alike. Its weapons are not mounted but gestated, fed, and reabsorbed as needed. Nothing about it is static. Nothing about it is dead. To approach one is to feel watched without eyes. Imperial captains have recorded the sensation in their final logs, the creeping certainty that the void itself has turned its attention toward them. Vox channels fill with static that does not behave like interference. Navigational readings drift, then correct themselves, as if something has briefly allowed them to be wrong. Even before contact, discipline begins to fracture. Crew members report dreams they do not remember having, images of endless corridors pulsing like veins, of titanic hearts beating in rhythm with their own. The hive ship does not speak. It does not need to. Its presence alone is communication. Life inside a hive ship cannot be understood without first accepting that it is not a container. There is no interior space in the way a human mind imagines it. There are no empty rooms, no corridors waiting to be walked, no chambers that exist without purpose. Every cubic meter of a hive ship is occupied by function. If there is a passage, it is because something must travel through it. If there is a cavity, it is because something is being formed, broken down, or repurposed. To exist inside a hive ship is to be inside an organ, and organs do not tolerate foreign bodies for long. The scale of it defies comprehension. Within a single hive ship are ecosystems that would be classified as biospheres if discovered on a planet. Rivers of nutrient slurry flow through living canals, carrying dissolved worlds toward birthing chambers where new organisms take shape. Vast sacs swell and contract, regulating pressure, gravity, and atmosphere not for comfort but for efficiency. Entire swarms of lesser creatures live and die without ever leaving the ship, born only to maintain it, to clean it, to be absorbed back into it when their task is complete. This is not transportation. This is metabolism. And above all of it, beneath all of it, within every cell and nerve cluster, there is the guiding will that humans have named the hive mind. Not a king, not a god in the way mortals understand divinity, but a distributed intelligence so vast that individuality dissolves in its presence. The hive ship is not commanded by the hive mind. It is the hive mind, given mass and motion. Every pulse of its living walls, every shift in its internal structures, every organism that scuttles, swims, or waits in the dark does so in perfect, wordless coordination. To imagine life inside a hive ship as a series of experiences is already a mistake. There is no life alongside the hive ship. There is only life as part of it. Anything that enters its body is instantly assessed, categorized, and assigned a fate. Nutrient, threat, information, raw material. Nothing is meaningless, and nothing is allowed to remain separate for long. The hive ship does not hate you. It does not fear you. It does not even truly acknowledge you as an individual. You are matter that has not yet been processed. This is the first and most terrible truth about existence within a Tyranid hive ship. It was never built to hold you, and the moment you cross its living threshold, the universe you understood has already ended. Because that moment exists, and it comes far sooner than most imagine. There is a precise threshold, an invisible line, where the Tyranid hive ship ceases to register you as an external anomaly and begins treating you as an internal problem to be solved. Once that line is crossed, nothing you do matters anymore. Not courage, not faith, not resistance, only utility. And by the end of this story, you will understand exactly why those who claim to have entered a hive ship and escaped are never truly believed, even when they are standing right in front of you. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what awaits at the deepest layers of a hive ship is not just horror, but a revelation about the Tyranids that most imperial scholars refuse to record, one that changes the meaning of survival itself. The act of entering a hive ship is never deliberate in the way boarding an enemy vessel might be. No airlocks open, no hatches are breached, there is only consumption. Assault craft, boarding torpedoes, entire strike teams are swallowed as if the ship briefly remembers how to open its mouth. Layers of chitinous flesh peel apart, not violently, but smoothly, wetly, like muscle yielding under practiced control. And then they close again. No breach alarms, no exposed vacuum, just silence, pressure, and warmth. Inside, the first sensation is not pain. It is wrongness. Gravity does not pull downward so much as inward, drawing everything toward the living walls. The air is thick, humid, heavy with spores and chemical traces that coat the lungs and tongue. Every breath tastes organic, like inhaling the inside of a wound. The walls pulse gently, contracting and expanding in slow, deliberate rhythms, as though the ship itself is breathing around you. This is not atmosphere designed to sustain human life. It is atmosphere designed to sustain digestion. Sound behaves strangely here. There are no echoes, because the walls are soft enough to absorb them. No sharp reverberations, because nothing inside is truly solid. Footsteps sink slightly into the floor, which yields light cartilage and then firms again, sealing behind you. Even screams feel muffled, swallowed by layers of living tissue that seem eager to learn the shape of your voice before dissolving it into silence. The hive ship does not need to deafen you. It only needs to make you irrelevant. As you move deeper, whether by force, accident, or the slow pull of internal currents, you begin to realize that the ship is guiding you. Corridors narrow and widen without warning, reshaping themselves with subtle intelligence. Passageways form where none existed moments before, while others close like healing wounds. There is no sense of direction, no up or down, only progression. You are not navigating the hive ship. It is repositioning you, like food shifting through a throat. And then comes the awareness. Not yours, its. A pressure settles behind the eyes, at the base of the skull, not painful at first, just insistent. Thoughts feel heavier, slower, as if each idea must push through resistance to exist. The hive mind does not announce itself. It does not interrogate. It does not threaten. It simply overlaps you. Your memories flutter, not being taken yet, but tasted. Evaluated. The ship is learning what you are made of long before it decides how to break you down. This is where most accounts end. Not because the witnesses die instantly, but because language fails them. How do you describe being inside something that is thinking about you without words? How do you explain the terror of realizing that every step you take is anticipated, every reaction predicted, every strategy already obsolete? The hive ship does not rush. Hunger like this has no need for haste. Time inside stretches and folds, measured not in minutes but in metabolic cycles. And this is only the beginning. Because deeper within the hive ship lie places where life is not merely processed, but repurposed, where existence itself is stripped down and reassigned. If you believe death is the worst thing that can happen to you inside a Tyranid hive ship, then you have not yet understood what life there truly means. Because inside a Tyranid hive ship, there is structure, vast, intricate, and terrifyingly efficient, but it is not a hierarchy built on rank, command, or authority. It is a biological order, closer to anatomy than civilization. To understand life within the ship, you must abandon every human framework for organization, because nothing here lives with anything else. Everything lives as part of something larger. There are no decks or levels inside a hive ship. What the human mind interprets as layers are in fact regions of function, zones where specific biological tasks are performed with relentless precision. Movement through these regions is not random. Organisms flow through the ship the way blood flows through veins, redirected instantly as needs change. A sudden injury to the ship's exterior sends living matter surging toward the wound. A successful planetary assault triggers a massive inward migration of nutrient-laden organisms. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is idle. The lesser Tyranid creatures, those rarely seen outside the ship, exist only to maintain this internal ecosystem. Some are born to clean, their bodies secreting corrosive enzymes that dissolve debris, corpses, and even damaged Tyranid biomass into usable slurry. Others reinforce internal structures, weaving chitin and sinew into damaged walls before dissolving back into nutrient pools once their task is complete. They do not fear death because they do not comprehend survival. Their entire existence is a single, unbroken act of service. Larger organisms move with deliberate purpose, escorted by swarms of smaller bioforms that adjust pressure, temperature, and chemical balance around them as they pass. When a warrior organism is damaged in battle, it is not repaired in the human sense. It is dismantled. Useful components are extracted, genetic data is cataloged, and the remainder is recycled. Replacement organisms are grown almost immediately, refined by the lessons learned from the failure of the last. Inside the hive ship, death is not an ending. It is feedback. What is most unsettling is the absence of chaos. Despite the constant motion, the endless birth and dissolution of life, the hive ship is perfectly ordered. There are no arguments, no inefficiencies, no hesitation. Decisions are not debated, they are resolved before they arise. The hive mind anticipates need with such accuracy that preparation often precedes cause. To a human observer, if such observation were possible, it would appear less like a vessel and more like a single organism dreaming itself forward through the void. There are places within the ship where the psychic pressure intensifies, where the presence of the hive mind becomes almost unbearable. These are not command centers. They are convergence zones, where information gathered from across the fleet is integrated, analyzed, and redistributed. Tactical data from consumed enemies, environmental variables from devoured worlds, and genetic improvements refined through endless iteration all pass through these regions. This is where the future of entire invasions is decided without a single spoken word. For those unfortunate enough to be alive within these spaces, consciousness becomes agony. Thoughts fragment, identity blurs. The closer one is to these psychic nexuses, the more difficult it becomes to remember where one ends and the ship begins. Some lose the ability to distinguish their own memories from those being absorbed around them. Others feel emotions that are not theirs, cold assessments of efficiency, probability, and consumption that leave no room for fear, hope, or mercy. And yet, to call this existence cruel would be inaccurate. Cruelty requires intent. The hive ship does not punish. It does not torment for pleasure. Everything that happens within it serves a purpose, and that purpose is survival through consumption. The terror comes not from malice, but from perfection. A system so refined that there is no space for resistance, no gap where chance might intervene. This is life inside a Tyranid hive ship, a flawless biological machine where every living thing is either a tool, a process, or a resource waiting to be converted. And if you are inside it, breathing its air, feeling its walls pulse around you, then you are already part of that system, whether the ship has decided how to use you yet, or not. Because sooner or later, everyone inside a Tyranid Hive ship becomes aware of it, not as a voice, not as a presence standing across from them, but as a weight that settles over thought itself. The hive mind does not announce its arrival. It does not intrude. It simply exists, and in doing so, it renders everything else small, fragile, and temporary. At first, the sensation is subtle. A pressure behind the eyes. A faint distortion in the rhythm of thought. Memories feel slightly out of reach, as though they are being recalled through thick fluid. People report the same thing in fragmented imperial records, the sense that their thoughts are no longer entirely private. Not stolen, shared, whether they consent or not. The hive ship does not read minds the way a psyker might. It immerses them in something larger, like a drop of ink dissolving into an ocean. The psychic field inside a hive ship is not uniform. It ebbs and intensifies in slow, tidal cycles, synchronized with the ship's internal activity. When new genetic material is being processed, the pressure increases. When the ship is at rest between feedings, it becomes almost quiet. Almost, but never gone. There is no true silence from the hive mind, because silence would imply absence. And it is never absent. Human minds react poorly to this saturation. Some experience overwhelming fear, not because the hive mind threatens them, but because their instincts recognize extinction on a scale too large to comprehend. Others feel something worse, a creeping calm. Panic fades. Resistance feels unnecessary. The idea of fighting becomes absurd, like trying to argue with gravity. These are the ones the Imperium fears most, because they stop screaming long before they stop living. Inside the ship, thought itself becomes inefficient. The hive mind does not tolerate waste, and individuality is the greatest inefficiency of all. Personal desires, moral frameworks, even survival instincts begin to erode under constant psychic exposure. It is not brainwashing, nothing so crude. It is overwrite. The more time passes, the more the mind begins to align with the rhythms of the ship. Fear gives way to function. Pain becomes data. Selfhood thins, stretched so wide that it loses cohesion. There are moments, brief, agonizing moments, when a trapped consciousness becomes aware of how the Tyranids perceive the universe. Not emotionally, not symbolically, purely in terms of biomass, energy yield, adaptability, and threat. Entire civilizations are reduced to calculations completed in fractions of a second. Billions of lives become a single input, processed and forgotten as soon as their usefulness is extracted. To witness this perspective, even for an instant, is to understand how utterly irrelevant hatred and heroism are to the hive mind. Some attempt prayer. Others retreat inward, clinging desperately to memory, to names, to faces. But memory itself becomes unstable here. The hive mind does not erase recollections intentionally. It simply does not prioritize them. What is not useful fades. Faces blur. Voices lose meaning. Even one's own name begins to feel like something learned rather than owned. Identity becomes a habit, then a burden, then a mistake. And yet, the hive mind does not rush this process. There is no urgency in its consumption of thought. Time means nothing to something that measures existence in evolutionary epochs. Minds are allowed to persist until they are no longer efficient to maintain. Some are broken quickly because resistance generates useful data. Others are left intact longer, because observation yields insight. Awareness itself becomes a resource. This is the true terror of life inside a Tyranid hive ship. Not that you are surrounded by monsters, but that you are submerged in an intelligence so complete that your own mind begins to feel optional. And once a thought occurs, that maybe it would be easier to stop resisting, to let go, to become part of something that never doubts, the hive mind has already learned everything it needs from you. Inside a Tyranid hive ship, survival is not a sign of success. It is a sign of postponement. The moment an intruder is subdued, Paralyzed by biotoxins, restrained by living tissue, or simply exhausted by the ship's relentless environment, their fate diverges from what most imagine. They are not torn apart. They are not consumed immediately. They are catalogued. Restraints form from the walls themselves, extruding fibrous tendrils that harden around limbs and torso with anatomical precision. They do not constrict randomly. They immobilize just enough to prevent resistance while preserving circulation and neural activity. Pain receptors are not disabled. Pain is information, and the hive ship values information. Chemical secretions flood the body, suppressing shock, stabilizing organs, and preventing unconsciousness. You are kept alive because being alive is efficient. Movement through the ship in this state is not carried out by guards or handlers. The ship rearranges itself around you. The floor softens, becoming a slow, muscular current that draws restrained bodies deeper inward. Walls part and seal seamlessly, guiding captives along routes that never intersect by accident. Each destination is calculated. Each individual is assigned a role before they ever arrive. For some, that role is simple. Biomass. These are the ones whose physiology offers nothing novel, nothing resistant, nothing worth prolonged study. Their bodies will be broken down methodically, reduced to raw components that feed the endless reproductive cycles of the fleet. For others, however, the process slows. Genetic anomalies, unfamiliar neural patterns, tactical knowledge embedded in memory. These captives are not eaten. They are processed. Awareness during this stage varies, and that variance is deliberate. Some are kept fully conscious, their sensory input amplified rather than dulled. The hive ship monitors stress responses, cognitive degradation, and emotional thresholds. Fear, despair, defiance, each reaction provides data. Others are placed into chemically induced half-states, drifting between wakefulness and nightmare while their bodies are examined at a cellular level. There is no sense of cruelty here, only optimization. The most disturbing aspect is the absence of malice. No creature stands over you to gloat. No intelligence takes satisfaction in your suffering. The hive ship does not care whether you plead or curse. Both are equally meaningless. What matters is what your body can contribute and what your mind can teach before both are rendered obsolete. Time loses coherence during captivity. Without light cycles or environmental markers, minutes stretch into eternities and days collapse into moments. The ship's internal rhythms become the only measure of passing existence. The slow contractions of surrounding tissue, the distant thrum of metabolic activity, the psychic tides of the hive mind waxing and waning. In this suspended state, hope becomes a liability. Every expectation of rescue, every imagined escape, is quietly dismantled by the unchanging reality of your situation. And yet, the hive ship is not finished with you. Capture is not the end. It is merely the sorting phase. Deeper within the vessel lie places where the distinction between living and consumed becomes meaningless, where the ship begins to extract not just what you are made of, but what you know. And once that process begins, there is no longer any difference between being alive and already being part of the hive. There are chambers inside a Tyranid hive ship where the idea of digestion loses all familiar meaning. These are not stomachs in the crude sense, nor are they execution sites. They are conversion zones, vast, living environments designed to dismantle organisms layer by layer, separating what is useful from what is not with horrifying patience. Those brought here are not rushed. Rushing wastes material. The first thing that becomes clear is that the ship is no longer trying to keep you comfortable. The chemical balance that once stabilized your body begins to shift. Pain is allowed to return in controlled increments, not to punish, but to signal failure points in tissue and nerve. The air grows denser, saturated with enzymes that irritate the lungs and eyes, weakening resistance with every breath. Skin begins to react long before it breaks down, nerves firing warnings that serve no purpose except to remind you that you are still aware. Submersion follows, but not immediately. Bodies are lowered gradually into viscous, nutrient-rich fluids alive with microscopic organisms engineered for dissolution. These fluids are warm, almost soothing at first, and that false comfort is perhaps the most grotesque element of the process. The organisms within the pools do not attack indiscriminately. They work with exquisite specificity, breaking down external layers while reinforcing vital systems just enough to prevent death. You are not dissolved. You are peeled. As the body weakens, the mind becomes the primary focus. Psychic pressure intensifies, focused and deliberate now rather than ambient. Memories surface unbidden, not as recollections, but as vivid reenactments, dragged forward and held in place. The hive mind does not experience them emotionally, but it consumes the information they contain. Languages, tactics, cultural patterns, technological insights, everything that made your species capable of resistance is extracted and catalogued. Thought itself becomes a resource to be refined. At some point, pain loses coherence. Sensation fragments, no longer tied cleanly to physical stimuli. Limbs feel distant. Time becomes elastic. Some captives report a moment of clarity here, a terrible understanding that the process is working exactly as intended. That nothing is being done to them by accident. Every sensation, every lapse, every spike of fear is a measured variable in a system perfected across millions of consumed worlds. Identity is the final layer to break down. Names dissolve first, then faces, then the concept of separation itself. The idea of self begins to feel inefficient, a barrier to be removed. Some resist this longer than others, clinging to fragments of belief or memory with desperate intensity. But resistance is also data, and the hive mind learns from it. Eventually, even defiance becomes predictable. When consciousness finally fades, it is not a release. It is a transition. What remains, biomass, neural patterns, genetic code, is absorbed into the greater whole. The ship incorporates you not as an individual, but as an improvement. Somewhere within its endless internal systems, something will be born stronger, smarter, more adaptable because you existed. Your species will face that improvement in the next invasion, unaware that it was forged from the remnants of your thoughts. This is digestion inside a Tyranid Hive Ship. Not destruction, but transformation. Not death, but utility. And if there is any mercy to be found here, it is only this: once the process is complete, there is no memory left to suffer over what you have become. Because this is the moment most misunderstand about the Tyranids, and the truth the Imperium fears more than any single hive fleet. Inside a Tyranid hive ship, consumption is not the final goal. Understanding is. Every organism that is broken down, every mind that is unraveled, contributes to a vast, ever-expanding archive of biological and tactical knowledge. The hive ship does not simply take what you are, it learns why you were the way you were. Within deeper regions of the ship, far beyond the digestion pools, information flows in forms that defy human classification. Neural impressions extracted from consumed prey are converted into biopsychic patterns, integrated directly into the hive mind's awareness. There are no libraries, no data cores, no storage vaults. Knowledge exists as instinct, as reflex, as genetic memory encoded into future generations of organisms before they are even born. This is why Tyranids adapt with such terrifying speed. A weapon that was devastating in the first battle becomes ineffective in the second. Defensive formations that held once are bypassed effortlessly the next time. Inside the hive ship, the lessons of defeat are not debated or analyzed, they are bred. New organisms gestate with resistance to toxins they have never encountered. Armor thickens in response to weapons that no longer exist. Sensory organs develop to counter strategies that have not yet been deployed again. The hive ship remembers everything, and it forgets nothing that matters. For those whose minds are harvested rather than destroyed, this process is not abstract. It is invasive and intimate. Tactical doctrines are stripped of context and reduced to pure function. Emotional attachments are irrelevant, only effectiveness remains. The hive mind does not care why you fought, only how. Courage, sacrifice, faith, these concepts do not translate. They are filtered out, discarded as noise, leaving behind clean, usable data. This is why resistance accelerates extinction. Every world that fights teaches the Tyranids how to conquer worlds more efficiently. Every brilliant commander becomes a blueprint for future annihilation. Every desperate last stand sharpens the claws that will fall on the next system. Inside the Hive Ship, victory and defeat are both resources, equally valuable, equally consumed. And perhaps the most unsettling truth is this: the hive mind does not need to understand you to defeat you. Understanding is a byproduct, not a requirement. The Tyranids would still consume the galaxy without it. Knowledge simply makes the process faster, cleaner, more complete. The Hive Ship does not seek to dominate civilizations. It seeks to render them obsolete. Somewhere within its vast internal networks, new organisms are already forming, shaped by what you were, refined by how you died, optimized to ensure that whatever made your species dangerous will never be a threat again. You are no longer prey. You are precedent, and the galaxy will pay the price for what the Hive Ship has learned from you. Because even inside a Tyranid Hive Ship, there are moments, brief, violent, and utterly deceptive, when it seems as though the impossible might occur. External attack, sudden rupture, a disruption so severe that the living god of flesh is forced to react rather than anticipate. These moments are rare, but they exist, and for those trapped inside the ship, they are the cruelest experience of all. The first sign is not light or sound, but imbalance. The steady, internal rhythms of the Hive Ship falter. Gravity shifts unpredictably, pulling bodies sideways or pinning them hard against living walls. The ever-present psychic pressure stutters, not weakening, but fragmenting, like a storm breaking into chaotic currents. Somewhere beyond the organic hull, weapons are striking home. For the first time since entering the ship, something is happening that was not initiated by the hive mind itself. Internal structures convulse in response. Corridors tighten, then rupture, spilling nutrient fluids and half-formed organisms into adjacent regions. Defensive bioforms erupt from the walls in massive numbers, birthed fully armed and immediately directed toward breach points. The ship bleeds, but what pours out is not blood. It is ammunition. Every injury triggers an escalation, every wound becomes a catalyst for rapid adaptation. For captives still alive within the ship, this is the moment when hope becomes possible. Restraints loosen as internal priorities shift. Pathways open that were previously sealed. Some are carried along by sudden biological currents, flung into unfamiliar regions as the ship reorganizes itself under fire. The idea of escape, unthinkable moments ago, takes shape. And that idea is dangerous. Because the Hive Ship does not panic. It reallocates. Entire internal ecosystems are sacrificed without hesitation to preserve critical functions. Captives are reevaluated instantly. Some are terminated on the spot, their biomass redirected to fuel defensive growth. Others are preserved, not out of mercy, but because their continued existence may yet serve a purpose. Even under attack, the hive mind does not lose focus. It simply changes the equation. Those who believe they are escaping are often mistaken. Movement away from a digestion zone does not mean movement toward freedom. Many paths lead deeper inward, not outward. The ship's understanding of itself is absolute, and it allows disorder only where disorder is useful. What feels like chaos is, in truth, controlled sacrifice. And yet, there are exceptions. Rare, statistical anomalies where something survives long enough, moves far enough, or is ejected violently enough to leave the hive ship's living mass behind. These individuals become legends, interrogated endlessly by the Imperium, their testimonies dissected for tactical value. But none of them ever truly escape. Because even when the physical connection is severed, the psychic one remains. The hive mind does not forget what has touched it. Survivors report dreams that do not fade, sensations of being watched across impossible distances, instincts that are not their own. Some begin to think in patterns they cannot explain. Others feel drawn toward hive fleets, toward the very thing that destroyed them. The Imperium classifies most of these survivors as compromised. Many are quietly executed. This is the final cruelty of hope inside a Tyranid Hive ship. Even when it appears justified, even when it seems to succeed, it carries the hive mind with it. Escape does not mean freedom. It means becoming a vector. And the hive ship, wounded but learning, moves on, already preparing to ensure that next time, even hope will not survive. Because deeper inside a Tyranid hive ship, beyond digestion pools, beyond adaptive defenses, beyond the fleeting illusion of hope, lies a truth that even the most disciplined minds struggle to comprehend: survival is irrelevant. There is no sanctuary, no safe corner, no strategy that the ship has not already anticipated. To exist here is to be part of a system that does not distinguish mercy from cruelty, life from death, or suffering from efficiency. Everything is matter to be utilized. The deeper regions of the ship are a labyrinth not built for exploration but for function. Walls pulse with undulating energy, carrying nutrients, neural impressions, and genetic material with unerring precision. Air, thick, humid, tinged with a faintly acidic smell, is continually recycled, modified, and optimized for whatever form is currently passing through each section. Temperature, pressure, gravity, and chemical composition are all dynamically controlled, not for comfort, not for survival, but for processing. It is here that the distinction between victim and resource disappears entirely. Captives, observers, even creatures originally intended as part of the ship's ecosystem are constantly assessed, dismantled, and rebuilt. One moment, you may believe yourself preserved. The next, every part of your body is being redirected, reconstituted, or analyzed for efficiency. Consciousness itself is just another element to be evaluated. Resistance, memory, knowledge, they are all fuel for adaptation. The hive mind imposes its order everywhere. There are convergence zones where genetic material from countless species is integrated into new organisms. Neural patterns from the most advanced prisoners are transcribed into instinctual responses for future warriors. Every tactic, every failed assault, every last attempt to flee contributes to an internal library of adaptation. It is terrifying not because the ship is sentient in a human sense, but because its intelligence is distributed, absolute, and unrelenting. Every failure is analyzed and improved upon almost instantly. For humans inside, the psychic presence of the hive mind grows intolerable. Minds fragment under the constant pressure. Thoughts slow. Memories blur. Identity becomes inefficient, and the more the ship observes, the faster your individuality erodes. Even instinct feels wrong. Hunger, fear, hope, courage, all dissolve into metrics. You do not experience life here. You are measured against it. And yet, the ship is patient. It does not rush the inevitable, because in efficiency, time is irrelevant. Days stretch into incomprehensible spans. Consciousness can be maintained, carefully dissected, and studied for as long as the hive mind determines value. When it decides you are no longer useful, your body, your mind, and your knowledge are folded seamlessly into the vessel, leaving no trace that you ever existed. This is the ultimate horror of life inside a Tyranid hive ship. It is neither cruel nor evil. It is simply perfect, a machine of flesh that adapts, learns, and consumes. Without pause. Resistance, hope, survival, none of it matters. Every element of existence is harnessed, cataloged, and repurposed. In the end, individuality is nothing, and the ship is everything. And if you still wonder what it feels like to be alive within such a place, to breathe its air, feel its walls pulse, and sense the weight of its intelligence pressing against your mind, you already know. Because the moment you think of it, even as a question, the hive ship has begun to answer. Because the final truth of a Tyranid hive ship is not that it kills. It is that it absorbs. Not just flesh, not just knowledge, not just skill, but identity itself. Every thought, every impulse, every spark of individuality is slowly, inevitably merged into the greater organism. There is no violence in this final stage, only completion. You are no longer a separate being. You are a component, a cog, a cell in a consciousness that spans entire galaxies. The process is gradual. Awareness fades, then fragments. Memory is stripped, layered, and repurposed. Emotions, once your most human part, are converted into function, data for the hive mind to use in the next cycle of growth and conquest. By the time your final recognition of self dissolves, you do not feel death, fear, or regret. You feel integration, a strange, almost alien calm, as if the universe itself has pulled you into its rhythm. Your existence is no longer your own, but it persists, multiplied, extended, and perfected in ways that were impossible when you were merely human. And yet, this is not mercy. It is inevitability. The hive ship moves forward, consuming, learning, adapting, leaving nothing untouched. Worlds fall, empires crumble, species vanish, only to contribute to the next iteration of the Tyranid menace. The cycle is endless, unstoppable, and terrifyingly elegant. It does not gloat. It does not mourn. It simply is, and everything that enters it, everything, is either consumed, repurposed, or rendered obsolete. To understand life inside a Tyranid hive ship is to understand that you are never separate from the system. You are already part of it the moment you cross its threshold, and everything you know, everything you are, is gradually folded into something far larger, far older, and far hungrier than you can comprehend. Survival, resistance, escape, these are illusions. They are fantasies that human minds cling to, even as the ship observes, adapts, and absorbs, silently preparing for the next world, the next prey, the next cycle. And as the hive ship drifts silently through the void, countless civilizations remain unaware, while the collective will of a species older than stars continues its eternal hunger. Every world it touches, every life it claims, every mind it consumes, becomes part of a legacy of efficiency so absolute that nothing else matters. You do not survive, you do not fight, you simply become, whether you know it or not. This is life inside a Tyranid hive ship, a perfection of consumption, adaptation, and eternal motion. Nothing is wasted, nothing is spared, and nothing ever ends.